is not equal to salvation. Yet, knowing about God and knowing facts about God is not knowing God. Yet, you can know all the facts about salvation and have not received it. Yet, you can understand what it is to have a relationship with God and still not have a relationship with Him personally. So, I know, and I want to say that because I know personally that I told you all the story before, and I'm not going to repeat that story, but I want to take it to the portion B of the testimony I gave you at when I talked about the self-questions about salvation. I told you then that I had already been preaching. I was young in the ministry. I was going to ministry class. I had already understood. I knew a lot about doctrine. I knew a lot about my doctrine, other people's doctrines. I could argue with them about it. They tried to tell me that it wasn't one way to heaven and one way to God and Jesus only. I knew all of that. But I told you I didn't know Christ. And I kind of skipped over the how we got in our relationship part. I skipped over it quickly because we didn't have time. But does anybody know, I talked to you a lot about my deliverance. You remember me talking about how when I was being delivered, my first deliverance was when I really knew Christ and really like received Him in a relational way. And I think a lot of people, when I talk about it, people see me minister, people hear me preach, they think like I'm talking about deliverance that happened like in 2001, 2002, and I've been on the right track for 10, 15 years, even though I'm only 24. But it's really, my deliverance was only in 2009. So even though I got baptized at 8 years old, and I was speaking in tongues since 12, I didn't really get saved till 2009, end of 2009. Because it wasn't until 2009 that I understood the truth about God and what it was to really be saved and what it was to really have a relationship. So I had been praying. God had been speaking to me. I had all of these experiences, but I had what I was telling you is like I had Jesus. I knew about him. I was a fanatic. I was like, yeah, Jesus. I had, I was, your proverbial fan. I was, out here with the t-shirts on, so to speak. And, in my hand, waving the flag, Jesus. And that was cool for that time, but it wasn't until my deliverance where I really knew, not just that He was real. I knew He was real before He had spoke. You can't be a fan of somebody unless you know they're real. You can't believe on somebody unless you know that they actually exist. But I didn't have faith in the grace part. I didn't have faith in the fact that He just really, I kept really thinking that He really wanted me to change, and He really wanted me to be something, and there were really a prerequisite. And it wasn't just as easy as accepting Him. It wasn't just easy accepting the free gift of salvation. And I want you to know that if you have accepted Christ without accepting Him in that way, without accepting that He doesn't have a prerequisite for you other than the faith, other than belief on Him, and other than your desire to say, I don't know this way, I'm like Abram, God, I don't know where we're going, I don't know what the journey is going to be like, but I know I want to start the journey. If you haven't come that way, you really haven't come, and I know because I hadn't come. And so it was a very scary thing, and it was kind of salty. I mean, imagine yourself in my situation. You've been saved for years, quote unquote. You've been preaching. You were already a youth leader. You've been speaking in tongues. You've been praying. You've prophesied already. And you have to sit here and come to like the realization, and now have to tell people, I just got saved, y'all. I just got saved. Had to go back to a new church and really start all over from scratch, like I never knew anything. But the journey was well worth it. It was well worth it, and it was certainly something that wasn't like, something I had to be ashamed about, or I felt like I needed to be ashamed of, because it was like, well, it took me this long, but when people see me, they don't realize that, or that's not something that's evident. And I say all that to say, because I want you to be clear when you hear the call. I don't want you to feel like, I've been in church all the time, if I see no prayer, I'm going to look really stupid. I want you to feel like if your parents are there, that you have to kind of be like, I don't know, I was saved all the time. I don't want you to have all those feelings. I want you really to be clear that it's not us asking you because it's something that's on the program. It's something that's really on the heart of God. And if you feel that it's God, respond to His voice. I want to tell you that as a minister and as a leader, the most vulnerable position you can be in is when you ask a person if they want to receive salvation. Has anybody ever evangelized somebody, asked somebody if they want to be saved? None of you have done that? You've done that, Brittany? So you can attest that it is really one of the most vulnerable positions, especially when you're in love with God. Let me ask you this, and I wish Beyonce would say, I hope she makes it back before I finish this so she can kind of share. Have any of you ever had a boyfriend, girlfriend, maybe just a close friend, and you brought them around like your family or your other friends? Anybody ever had somebody you like really liked, or really was cool with, or maybe it was a boyfriend, girlfriend, you had to bring around your family, bring around your friends? You had that? Did you care if they liked them? Did you care if they got along?
Not really.
Were you in love with the person? So when you like that about a person, I've had people, I bring them my little circle of friends. Friends don't like them, I'll be like, Dad, that's crazy. But when you really, let me ask you this though. If you bring your mom, like when the first time your mom meets your friends, the reason you so like, is this sometimes uncomfortable? Or sometimes it can be kind of like, well, not even just your mom, maybe just your parents, the more embarrassing they are, the more uncomfortable it is usually. The reason why is because you don't want your friends who you really like, who you really get along with, you really care about, and this mom, this person who you really care about, who you really love, you don't want one to think bad about the other. They do matter, right? Like, it does matter how they feel about each other, because you don't want, it matters how they feel about each other, because when you really care about a person, you don't want like other people you care about to see them in a negative light. Beyonce, you kind of missed when you went to the bathroom. I was talking about like when you as a minister or as a leader, one of the most vulnerable positions you can be in is when you have to ask somebody if they want to see Christ. And I'm kind of explaining how, like, you know, if you have a boyfriend or a girlfriend or just a close friend, you kind of introduce them to your parents. How that can be really awkward, because when you really care about a person, you care about how the two get along and how they see each other. And so as a minister, as a leader, but most of all as a servant of God, as a member of the kingdom, as the bride of Christ, I'm in love with God. Like, I really, 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 really am in love with him. And I don't have the time or the space in one little lead thing to tell you what God has been to me or what he has meant to me. But I tell you, I could never really impart to you the depth of the lostness that I was before Christ. Like, I can't really explain to you the kind of thoughts that went through my head that at 14 years old, having to be taken out of the school because I had OD'd on pills and had to be rushed to the hospital from school, and to just go about life like it was nothing. I mean, I can't tell you what it was to really feel like nobody cares and nobody listens and nobody understands, and have those feelings for years. So when Christ really fulfilled those voids to me, it wasn't just like, oh, that's cool. Like, when I really didn't just understand that God loved me cognitively, but I really understood the depth of it, like, you know, this guy really loves me. Like, he really, how I actually knew from my deliverance. Because I was like, there's no way, as crazy as I am, and as much as I don't even care about God at this point, and as worthless as I am, I don't have any skill sets, there's no reason, I have nothing to add to the kingdom, that God would not only care enough about my deliverance, but then be bothering his leaders, having them call my way down here so I will be delivered, and I have nothing to offer. After I've been out here telling people, don't be talking about God around me, I don't want to hear all that, and then forgot to do all that. It was like, no, God really loves me, and then he has heard my call. He has heard me saying, I really want to be delivered, and then he does it. Like, and that was just the beginning portion of me really coming to a place of falling in love. So because I'm so in love with God, because I know what he has meant to me as a leader, it's such a vulnerable place to have to say, do y'all want that with him? Because when people say, no, you'd be like, really? Seriously? You don't think he's decent? It's like, you know, showing somebody your wife, and they'd be like, I don't know, yikes. You'd be like, why would you say that? You know, you would get like, and you probably, I mean, well, Christ, you don't really get mad, but I've seen people in evangelistic settings being kind of like, oh, all right, you know, because it's kind of personal. Now, I have made much more sense than to take it personal. I don't get upset. I don't take it like that. But it is kind of like you do feel it in your chest, because it's like for real, you don't want all that with them. Like you want to just stay lost. You want to just stay like without that. So I wanted to be open in saying that to you, because if nobody receives it, if nobody accepts salvation, that's okay. I have enough sense to know that that's not a rejection of the person. It's a rejection of the Christ. It's you saying, say no to him, not no to me. But because of that, I do want to do all that is within my power to facilitate you and empower you to be able to know all that you need to know when you make a decision. When you hear the call,